Screen is visible, students? Screen is visible?
Yes, visible.
Okay, thank you. I had begun with the topic on immediate input and immediate output instructions. In the last class, we have discussed what is the immediate input and immediate output instructions. An immediate input instruction is the one which updates the input image table file at that particular instant of time. Whatever is the status of the input at that particular instant of time, that is updated in the input image table file. That is immediate input instruction function. Then the function of the immediate output instruction is it immediately updates the status of the output image table file to the output module or to the field device, right? That is the immediate output instruction. In the immediate input instruction, what is happening? Whatever is the status of the input, that is updated in the input image table file. And in the immediate output instruction, what is happening? Whatever is the status of the output image table file, that is updated to the field device. That is updated to the field device, right? So this is what we call them as immediate input instruction and immediate output instruction. Now there is an advanced version of this immediate input and immediate output instruction, and these instructions are called as immediate input with mask instruction. Immediate input with mask instruction, in short it is called as IIM instruction. Now the meaning of immediate input with mask instruction is only certain portion of the input will be updated, right? Let us see what it means. The SLC 500's instructions, which are called immediate input with mask and immediate output with mask, that is IIM and IOM, allow the programmer to specify which of the 16 bits are to be copied from input module to the input image table file. That means if the input data is of 16 bits, that is the status of the input device, it is of 16 bits, then among those 16 bits only certain bits are chosen, right? If it is of 16 bits data, among the 16 bits only certain portion of the input data is chosen, only some bits are chosen, and only those bits are stored into the image table file, input image table file. That is the meaning of copying only few bits among all the 16 bits. Copying only few bits among all the 16 bits and storing them in the input image table file. This is one part. Another part is copying the among all the bits of the output image table file, copying only certain bits and updating only these few bits to the output device or to the output field device, right? So these are the two ways in which the immediate input and immediate output instruction work. Right now we are talking about the immediate input with mask instruction. That means only few bits among the input status bits are stored into the input image table file. Okay. The other bits in the input image table or output module are not affected by these instructions. That means let us say there are 16 bits. 16-bit data is there, which is giving the status of the input device. Among all those 16 bits, suppose if we are choosing only 10 bits out of 16 bits, only the status of these 10 bits will be copied into the input image table file. The rest of the 6 bits, they are not affected. They will remain unchanged. They'll remain as it is. Only we are updating that first 10 bits of the input data to the input image table file. The remaining 6 bits will not be affected. They will remain as they are, right? The immediate input with mask instruction is as shown in the figure 1. In the figure 1, they have shown the input immediate with mask instruction, immediate input with mask instruction. We'll see that here. This is the IIM instruction block. This is the tab which shows the IIM instruction, that is input output instruction. Here we have the slot. The first portion of the instruction is slot, which indicates that it is a input. I means input, 1 means it is slot number, and 0 means it is word. I indicates input, colon 1 indicates slot number, and dot 0, this 0 indicates the word number, which word it is, right? So here the first slot 0 word or word 0 is updated, and it is sent or copied into the input image table file through the mask, that is 000FH. What it means here is, now in the word file, that is which is of 16 bits, word means it is of 16 bits, nibble means 4 bits, byte means 8 bits, right? We are familiar with this convention, right? Naming, it is byte, bit is single bit, either 1 or 0, nibble means 4 bits, byte means 8 bits, and word means 16 bits. Okay, it is a 16-bit data, that is input slot 1 in the rack, and then word 0 in the slot 1 of the rack of the PLC. We are choosing that, and among the 16 bits we are masking the remaining first 12 bits. We are masking first 12 bits, we are masking. The meaning of masking is, we are making the 16 bits, out of 16 bits the first 12 bits we are making them 0. This is the meaning of masking. Masking means we are clearing the remaining bits which we don't want. We don't want the first 12 bits. I want only the last 4 bits of my data. So what I will do with the first 12 bits, I will mask them. I will mask them means I will clear them. I will make them 0, right? And the remaining 4 bits, whatever are there, that I will pass on, or I will copy it to the input image table file. Okay, this is how it is done with the IIM instruction, immediate input with mask. Slot is given, mask means which of the bits we have to mask or which of the bits we have to clear, that is mentioned in the instruction. And length means how many words we are copying in one slot, right? Whether we are copying only one word, then whether we are copying 2 words for one slot, that is decided by this length. If length is say 2, that means we are copying 2 words in one slot. 2 words in one slot are there, so we are copying these 2 words from the slot into the input image table file. Okay, when the IIM rung is true, the program scan is interrupted and data from a specific input slot are transferred through the mask to the input data file. When the rung becomes true, when the PLC rung becomes true, the program scan is interrupted. It is going to interrupt the scan of the program. What is program scan, students? Try to recollect. What is meant by scanning process? What all it involves? Can anybody recollect the scanning steps? Which are the various steps in scanning process? Yes, please. Who will tell me the various steps in scanning process? Which are the steps? Yes, anybody? Prasad? Can you tell me, Prasad? Nimani Patil? Nimani Patil? Inoch? Inoch?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me, Inoch, which are the various steps in the scanning process? Try to recollect what we
Yes, sir.
discussed. Yes, please. Come on, tell me. First step. Which is the first step, Inoch? In the scanning process, IO scanning or program scanning, which is the first step?
Input scan, sir.
Correct. You're right. Input scanning means it will read the status of the input and it will store that data into the input image table file. Okay. That's the first step. Second step. What is the second step?
Executing, sir.
Executing. Very good.
Logic
It will
execution.
execute the instructions, right? Ladder rung instructions it will execute. It will collect the data from the input and it will execute the ladder rung instructions. It will process the input data. Fine. Third step, last step.
Output scan, sir.
Output.
sir.
It will output the whatever it is processed. Correct. Whatever data it has processed, it will send it to the output. Okay, output scanning. Right. So these are the 3 steps in the scanning process. Fine. Next. So what it will do here is when the IIM rung is true, when the immediate input with mask instruction is true in the ladder rung, the program scan is interrupted and the data from the input slot will be copied into the input image table file. Okay, when the rung becomes true or when the IIM instruction becomes true in the ladder rung, whatever data is there from the input slot, that is copied into the input image table file. These data are then available. Now once we copy them to the input image table file, the data is available for the other instructions of the ladder rung. We are copying from input slot to the input image table. Then once we have copied it, the data whatever we have copied, that will be available for the other instructions of the ladder rung. These data are then available to the commands in the ladder following the IIM instruction. The following parameters are entered in the instruction. Which are the parameters that are entered in the immediate input with mask instruction, IIM instruction? First one is a slot. Slot specifies the slot and word that contain the data to be updated. For example, I:3.0, what it means? That is input slot 3 word 0. I:3.0 means input slot 3 word 0. This contains the slot number and the word number which should be updated to the input image table file. That is, we can see in this instruction, slot number I:1.0. It can be anything. It can be 3.0 or 3.5, I:3.7. It can be anything. Mask specifies a register address. Here, mask means it is the memory location or the address of the data. Okay, it is the address of the register or the address of the memory location in which we are performing the masking operation. That is, whatever data is there in slot, that is sent to the mask, this register or this memory location 000FH here, and it is going to clear the first 12 bits. So what is meant by first 12 bits? F means it is 1111. F is 15 in hexadecimal. F means 1111 in binary. Then 0, this 0, next 0, it is 4 bits. 0000. It is 0 only. Then next 0, again it is 4 bits here. This 0. Here, this 0, it is 4 bits. 0000. Then the MSB, most significant bit, 0. This is having 4 bits, 0000. So totally how many bits? This is 4 bits. This is 4 bits 8. This is 4 bits 12. This is 4 bits 16. Okay, total 16 bits. Out of 16 bits, it is going to clear the first 12 bits. It is going to clear the first 12 bits, and the remaining 4 bits will be 1111. Okay, so those data will be copied into the input image table file, that is 1111. For the mask, a 1 in the bit position passes data from the source to destination. If we are storing 1 in the mask, in this mask here, if we are storing 1, it means whatever data is there in the input slot, that will be transferred to the input image table file. Suppose if 0 is stored in the bit position in the memory location of the mask, that means we are not transferring or copying the data from input slot to input image table file. We are copying the data from input slot to the input image table file only if the bit in the memory location of the mask is 1. Okay. A 0 inhibits or blocks bits from passing from the source to the destination. Here source means which is the source here? Source is the input slot, the status of the input device, whichever is connected to the PLC. Then destination means it is the input image table file. The data will be copied or it will be moved from source to destination, that is from input slot to the input image table file. Length is used to transfer more than 1 word per slot. If we want to transfer more than 1 word per slot, then we are using the length here. We are specifying how many words we are moving in 1 slot. Okay, that is given by the length. Here, this is the length. If it is 1, then only 1 word per slot. If it is 2, then 2 words per slot. 3 means 3 word per slot, like that. The operation of the instruction is like this. The IAM instruction retrieves data from I:1.0 and passes it through the mask. They have explained the working of the instruction. The input mask instruction or immediate input with mask instruction, it retrieves the data. That means it collects the data from I:1.0 and passes it to the mask. What the mask will do, it will permit only the 4 least significant bits. It will permit only least significant 4 bits to be moved to the input data table file. That is, here the least significant bits are the lowest 4 bits. FF means 1111 in binary. F is in hexadecimal. Okay, hexadecimal means it is from 0 to F. Okay, hexadecimal means it consists of the digits from 0 to 9, and the next 6 digits will be A, B, C, D, E, F. So totally 15, right? 0 to 15. That is what we call as hexadecimal. Hexadecimal number system. As there is a decimal number system, binary number system, similarly there is hexadecimal number system, right? In hexadecimal number system, the numbers vary from or count from 0 to 9, and after 9 it varies from A to F. It counts from A to F. A, B, C, D, E, F. This is in hexadecimal number system. So F means it is 15. 15. A 15 binary equivalent is 1111. Okay, then similarly 0 means it is 0. Okay, 0 0 0 0, right? So I told you all how to convert the given hexadecimal number to binary. Okay, suppose if you want to convert 15 to binary, you have to divide repeatedly by 2 and take the remainders. Okay, 2 7s are 14, 1 is the remainder. 2 3s are 6, 1 is the remainder. 2 1s are 2, 1 is the remainder. 2 0s are 0, 1 is the remainder. So we get 1 1 1 1, all 4 remainders in the reverse direction. Okay, that will give you the binary. Or you can use your calci, keep it in the hexadecimal mode, and then convert it into binary. That is also okay, right? Like this. This allows the programmer to update only sections of the inputs to be used throughout the rest of the program. We are updating only part of the inputs, not all the inputs. The meaning of masking is we are updating only few input bits among all the bits, not all the bits. This is the meaning of masking. Is this IAM instruction clear here? Any difficulty in this? IAM instruction, immediate input with mask instruction. Any doubts, any questions on this?
Sir, no, sir.
7? No. Okay, all right. We'll move further. Similarly, we have immediate output with mask. It is similar to immediate input with mask, except a slight changes in the input. Immediate input with mask instruction, the data is copied from the input slot, input device status, into the input image table file. This is what we call as immediate input with mask, and it is along with the masking operation. It is not only copied from the input slot to the input table file, but there is masking operation also. That is, few of the bits will be masked, will be cleared among all the bits. Okay, in the immediate output with mask instruction, what is happening? The data from the output table file will be sent, or it will be copied to the status of the output device, or it will be sent to the field device, right? This is what we call as immediate output with mask. Here it is just not only copying, but it is with the mask. We are clearing few of the bits and we are retaining the remaining bits as they are. This is immediate output with mask instruction. This shows the menu tab, okay, of the immediate output. IOM stands for immediate output with mask. IOM expansion is immediate output with mask, IOM. This is the block of the immediate output with the mask instruction. It is at the output side. Okay, it is at the end of the rung. It is at the output side. Slot number O:4.0. Here O indicates that it is output, then 4 indicates it is a slot number, then 0 indicates it is the word. Then mask 0FFH. Can anybody tell me what is the meaning of mask 0FFH? What it indicates here? Make a guess. Here what it was in the previous IIM instruction 000FH. What I told there 000FH means it is masking the first 12 bits and the remaining 4 bits will be retained as they are. Right? Here what is happening 0FFH. So which are masked and which are retained as they are? Which bits are masked and which bits are retained as they are? 0FFH means. Can you just think of it? Prasad? Saval Harsh? Zero FFH means which bits are masked and which bits are kept as they are. Nemani Patil? Here what is happening 000FH. So the first 12 bits, first MSB 0 means it is 4 0 bits, 0000. Next 0 means again it is 4 0 bits, 0000. Then next third 0 means again 4 0 bits, right? So 4 plus 4, 8, 8 plus 4, 12. The remaining 4 bits it is 1 1 1 1. So these bits are not masked. The least significant 4 bits which are 1 1 1 1, they are not masked. They are not cleared. They are kept as they are. So similarly here 0FFH means, Inoj, can you make a guess of it? 0FFH? Inoj?
4 bits are masked.
Which 4 bits are masked? You are right. Which 4 bits are masked?
First
4 bits are masked. Very good. So the first 4 bits are masked or they are cleared because it is 0. So if you are multiplying with 0, ending with 0, it will give you zeros, is it not? So the first 4 bits, MSB 4 bits are masked, they are cleared, and the remaining 12 bits, FFH, FFH, they are kept as they are. Okay. So this is immediate output with mask. All the slot, mask length, everything is same, except there is change in the function that it performs. Okay. That is here, if O is the output, then 4 for slot number, dot 0, 0 means word number. That is output file slot number 4 word 0. That means from the output image table file, it is updating the slot number 4 and word 0 of the output field device. The output image table file data is updated to the output field device slot number 4 and word number 0. What data is updated? The last 12 bits. The last 12 bits of the data are updated. Okay, because the first 4 bits are becoming 0. Correct? Then length of the slot is 2. That means there are 2 words per slot. Okay, it is going to send or copy 2 words in one slot. Right? That is first it is copying 1 word, then it is copying the next word, like that. 2 words per slot. Okay. The immediate output with mask instruction is as shown in the figure. It operates on the physical outputs assigned to a particular word of a slot. The physical outputs, that is the field devices assigned to a particular word of a slot, they are updated. When the IOM rung is true, when the immediate output with mask instruction rung is true, the program scan is interrupted. It is going to interrupt the scanning process, output scanning process, when the immediate output with mask instruction becomes true. Once the program scan is interrupted, it will update the output data, output image table file data to the output module or to the field device located in a slot specified in the instruction. In the instruction, we are specifying the slot. Here it is given. Which slot it is? Slot number 4, word number 0. Okay. These data are then available to the commands in the ladder following the IOM instruction. Once we have updated, then the data, whatever we have updated, that is available to the other instructions in the ladder rung program. The parameters entered are basically the same as those entered for the IIM instruction. Whatever parameters we have entered for IIM instruction, immediate input with mask instruction, same parameters we are entering for the immediate output with mask instruction also. I told you what is the difference between IIM and IOM instruction. Okay. So this was all about immediate input with mask and immediate output with mask instruction. In examination, the possible question on this may be, explain with necessary figures the immediate input with mask and immediate output with mask instructions. You all have to draw the figures, that is the menu tab, and the block of the immediate output with mask instruction and the block of the immediate output with mask instruction, and you all have to explain in points. Okay. Next is forcing external IO addresses. Again, the name itself will tell what is the meaning of forcing external IO addresses. External means external input and output device. Forcing external input bar output. I means it stands for input, and then here O stands for output. External input bar output. That means forcing external input bar output addresses. It means that we are going to turn on or off the external input and output devices. We are going to force external input and output devices either in on state or in the off state. This is the meaning of forcing external input bar output addresses. Okay, we are forcing to make the external input or output devices to be turned on or off. Fine. Forcing allows the PLC user to turn an external input or output on or off from the keyboard of the programming device. We are operating the keyboard of the PLC of the programming device. From the keyboard, we are either turning on the external input or output, or we are turning off the external input or output forcibly by the will and wish of the programmer. It is because of the will and wish of the programmer. It depends on the will and wish of the programmer. This is accomplished regardless of the actual state of the field device. Whatever may be the state of the field device, either it may be in on state or in off state. But what we are doing, the user, what he is doing, he is forcing the external input or output to be either in off state or in the on state, irrespective of the state of the field device. The forcing capability allows a machine or process to continue operation until a faulty field device can be repaired. Now, what is done here? Here, the field device may be either on or off, it doesn't matter. But if the user wishes, to force the output on or off, then he is going to turn it on or off. Suppose field device is say off, it is off on its own, right? According to the ladder rung. Now, what user wants, he wants to turn it on, so he can do that. Forcibly, he can make the output to turn on from the off state. Let us say the field device is in on state. Forcibly, the user can make the field device, that is input or output devices, to be turned off. This is depending on the will and wish of the user or the programmer. When doing this, what is the advantage? Advantage is that the machine or the process is made to overcome from the faulty field device, and then the faulty device can be repaired. When we are forcing the, let us say there are two field devices. Let us say there are two output devices connected to the PLC, and one device, it is in faulty state. One device, output device, it is in faulty state. Let us say it has to be 1, its state has to be 1, but now it is 0. So we have to rectify that. We have to repair that field device. Another field device, it is already in the 1 state, right? We are forcing that output from 1 state to 0 state. Let us say the another output device. While doing so, what we can do, we can operate parallelly the another field device which is faulty, that we can operate and we can repair it and bring back its state to original state. there are two field devices or output devices connected to the PLC. One device is operating normally, another device is faulty. That means it is not operating normally. There is some fault in it. Okay, so we have to repair the faulty output device. If we want to repair the faulty device, we have to give some time. Now, how we are giving the time for repairing? What we are doing is, in the other normal device, whichever is operating normally, we are forcing it to some other state. Suppose, say, if the normal state of that field device is 1, we are making it 0, and when we are making it 0, there will be some time to make it 0. So within that span of time, what we are doing, we are repairing the field device which is not operating normally or which is under faulty condition. Okay, so it gives time for the field device to be repaired. That is the advantage or application of the forcing external IO addresses. It is also valuable during startup and troubleshooting of a machine or process. The same thing, if you want to troubleshoot the system, if you want to debug the PLC or the process, then what you have to do, you have to force the input or output, and that will give some time. Within that span of time, we can repair the process or the machine, can troubleshoot it. Forcing inputs manipulates the input image table file bits and thus affects all areas of the program that uses those bits. The meaning of forcing inputs means it manipulates the input image table file bits. It manipulates or changes the input image table file bits, right? We are forcing it. Okay, accordingly, how it changes? Suppose, say, if we are forcing the input, if you are forcing the input device to go from off state to on state. Initially, it is in off state. We are forcing it to go to on state. Once it goes to on state, the input image table file has to be updated. Yes or no? So that simultaneously, whatever is the state of the input device, that is reflected in the input image table file. It is updated in the input image table file immediately. Okay, that is the meaning of forcing inputs manipulates the input image table file bits and thus affects all areas of the program that uses those bits. The other parts of the ladder rung program which are making use of those input image table file bits, that is the manipulated bits, okay, that is going to be affected. The other parts of the program are going to be affected. The forcing of inputs is done just after the input scan. Once we are doing the input scanning process, just after the input scanning process, we are, that is after the input scan, suppose, say, there is one more scanning process you want to carry out. Before that or after the first scanning process, the data, whatever is manipulated, whatever we are forcing the input or output device, that data will be reflected into the input that is table file or into the output image table file. When we force an input address, we are forcing the status bit of the instruction at the IO address to an on or off state. When I use the word IO addresses, right? IO addresses means the status bit of the instruction. We are forcing the status bit of the instruction at the IO address, right? The status bit of the instruction at that IO address to be in on state or off state. There is certain input output address for the input device and output device. The input device has its own input address where it is located. The output device has its own address where it is located. The memory location in which the status of the output device is stored, or the memory location in which the status of the input device is stored. In the memory location where we are storing the status of the input device, we are forcing that status bit. We are forcing that status bit to change either from 1 to 0, or in the output address of the output device, we are forcing the status bit to go from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0. Okay, so when we are forcing the status bit of that instruction at the IO address to be on or off state, simultaneously that will going to alter the state of the input or output device. Once we change the status bits, that is reflected into the as the on state or the off state of the input and output field devices. Figure 3 illustrates how an input is forced on. The operation of the program is as follows. This shows forcing external IO addresses. Here we have the field input device, right? Now, what is the state of this field input device, students? Here it is. Actual state of input device is 0. Okay, it is off state. Here they have mentioned the state of the field input device is off state. But what we are doing by forcing the status bit of this input device to 1, we are making the field device to go from off state to on state. How? Because we are forcing it to go from off state to on state by changing the status bit, and the same, that is on state of the field device, is reflected in the input image table file as 1. Okay, this is the forced state of the input field device. Actual state of the field device is 0, it is in off state, but when we force it, we are making the state of the field device to go from 0 state to 1 state. Okay, that is how we are having it as 1 state. Okay, so online forces exist. What is the forces? It is enabled. Programming terminal forces the state of input i:1/3 to be on, or it is in 1 state. This is our ladder logic program, what we have stored in our PC. Then the same is explained in the form of ladder rung diagram. Here it is the off state, right? It is the off state. Then we are forcing it to go to on state here. So when we are forcing it, this is examine if, which is this examine if closed. So this becomes closed on state, and the output coil will be energized, and accordingly the output device will be turned on. Then similarly here the output contact at the input side, this is also examine if closed. This becomes true, the O:2/5, and the again output coil will be energized, which is connected in series with the contact O:2/5. Similar, so once this coil is energized, the output motor is going to be energized, and the motor is turning on O:2/6. In the upper part, the solenoid is turning on O:2/5, and in the second rung, the motor is turned on. Okay, a simple program, a simple process to illustrate what is the concept of forcing and how it is changing the operation of the ladder rung program. Okay, did you all understand here, students? Forcing external I/O addresses. Any difficulty here? All of you understood the concept of forcing external I/O addresses? Saval? Nemani Patil? Is it clear? Nemani Patil?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Okay, right. The processor ignores the actual state of input limit switch i:1/. They have explained the working of this program, of this concept. The program, what it does, it ignores the actual state of the limit switch. This is the limit switch. Once the current reaches the limit, it will operate from on to off state or from off to on state. That is, the processor ignores the actual state of input limit switch i:1/3. Although limit switch i:1/3 is off state, that is in off state 0 or false, the processor considers it as being in the on, that is state, on or 1 or true state, because it is forced to go from 0 state to 1 state. The programs can record this, and the program is executed with this forced status. In other words, the program is executed as if the limit switch were actually closed. The limit switch is not actually closed, but it is working as if the limit switch is actually closed position. Okay, because of the forcing of the field device. Okay, next is forcing external I/O addresses. That is external I/O addresses. Forcing outputs. First, what we did, we forced the input field device. Next is we are forcing the output field devices. Forcing outputs affects only the addressed output terminal. Whichever is the output terminal that we want to change the state, only that device state will be changed from on to off or from off to on state. Other devices status will not be affected. Therefore, since the output image table file bits are unaffected, your program will be unaffected. Let us see how it works. When we force an output address, we are forcing only the output terminal to an on or off state. That is, the status bit of the output instruction at the address is usually not affected. Let us see the working, then we'll come to know the meaning of this. The next figure illustrates how an output is forced on. This is the program that is forcing external IO addresses. Okay. Okay, right. So I'll explain the concept with the figure that is available here. Sorry that I have missed that slide. Here, the field device will be connected to the output. Instead of connecting it to the input here, it will be connected to the output. Say it is a solenoid at this side. This is our output image table file, and we have the solenoid on the other side. So that is the output device. So instead of the solenoid, let us say it is in off state. The solenoid is in off state. We are forcing the solenoid to go from off state to on state. That means what will be the that is a bit here, whether it be 0 or 1 after forcing. Here the solenoid, right, whatever is a solenoid, the output device, right, the output device, it is in off state. We are forcing the solenoid to go from off state to on state. What will be the bit stored in the output image table file, whether it will be 0 or 1 after forcing? Whether it be 0 or 1?
1, sir.
1. Is it not simple? Because the solenoid we are forcing from off to on state. It is in off state, we are forcing it to on state, right? So when we force it from off to on state, then whatever is the forced state, that will be reflected, that will be stored in the output image table file. If the forced state is 1, 1 will be stored in the output image table file. If the forced state is 0, then 0 will be stored in the output image table file. Okay, so that is the concept, right? The processor ignores the actual state of solenoid output O:2/5. The programming device sets the force state in the output force data file, and the PLC implements the force to turn solenoid output on, even though the output image table file indicates that the user logic is setting the point to off. Even though the state is 0, if we are forcing it, then it will be turned on, and that again will be reflected in the output image table file. M output O:2/6 remains off because the status bit of output is not affected by the force instruction. Suppose say we have connected 2 outputs. That's what I told at the beginning. We have connected 2 output devices to the PLC, and if you are forcing only one output device, the other output device will not be affected. There are 2 output devices which are connected to the PLC. If we are forcing the first one to go from off to on state, the second one will not be affected. It will remain in the same state. Suppose if we are forcing the second field device, second output device, to go from on state to off state, right? The first field device, it will remain in the same state as it is. It is not changed. Only whichever field device we are forcing, that field device status will be affected, not the other output devices. Okay, I hope I am clear here. Yes. Is it clear here, students? The concept of forcing external input
Yes,
and
sir.
output addresses. Okay, fine. Next is the safety circuits. Now, why we require safety circuits? Can you just have a thought on it? Why we should go for safety circuits? What is the use, or what is the advantage of the safety circuits? Safety, the name itself will indicate safety and safety circuit. Why we should go for safety circuit? Any idea?
So maybe like a fuse.
Yes, it is just like a fuse, protective device. Correct, you are right. That means if there is any fault in the PLC, if there is any fault or any repairing condition occurring in the PLC, right? If there is any emergency condition in the PLC, if something goes wrong in the PLC circuit, then we have to overcome that. Okay, we have to overcome that. We have to take immediate precautionary measure so that that fault is overcome. Okay, that is the meaning of safety circuits. These safety circuits are independent of the PLC circuits. The meaning of independent of the PLC circuit means, suppose if there is a PLC circuit, the safety circuit is separate circuit. It is not the same as in the PLC. It is not included in the PLC circuit. Safety circuit is a separate circuit which operates immediately as there is a fault in the PLC, and it will try to overcome any damage occurring to the PLC by immediately switching off the PLC. Because what may happen if the PLC is not switched off immediately, there can be hazard occurring or a damage occurring on the PLC. In order to avoid that damage, what should be done? Immediately the PLC should be turned off, the faulty condition should be repaired, and then it has to be restored back to its normalcy. The faulty condition has to be repaired and the PLC has to be restored back to its normal working condition. Only then the PLC will be coming under its normal state and it will work properly without causing any damage later. Okay. So sufficient emergency circuits must be provided to stop either partially or totally the operation of the controller or the controlled machine or process. What it means here? Sufficient emergency circuits must be provided to stop either partially, either to stop the PLC partially so that we can repair it without the operator getting affected. That is also important. When repairing, the operator or the service person, the maintenance person, he should not get affected. Okay, there should not be any damage to the person who is operating that instrument or the person who is looking after the PLC. Okay, or totally provided to stop either partially or totally the operation of the controller or the controlled machine or process. So it must be to stop partially, we have to stop the machine, the PLC, or we have to totally stop the operation of the PLC or the control machine or the process so that the emergency condition is overcome and the PLC is restored back to its normal operating condition. These circuits should be hardwired outside the controller so that in the event of total controller failure, independent and rapid shutdown is available. That means the circuit which we are using them for safety purpose, they are separate circuits apart from the PLC which we are making outside the PLC, and these circuits will see that in the event of total controller failure, suppose the PLC fails completely, then these independent circuits, safety circuits, they will immediately operate, they will immediately take over and they will shut down the PLC so that the personnel or the person, the maintenance person, will come and repair it, and then again the PLC will start operating in a normal way. Okay, these are called as the safety circuits. Next is selectable timed interrupt. The selectable timed interrupt, in short, is called as STI instruction. This is used to interrupt the scan of the main program file automatically on a time basis. We have seen what is an interrupt in our previous classes. I give the example of you are writing something and if a friend asks you a pen, okay, that is your friend is interrupting you. Your friend is interrupting you. You are writing something and if your friend asks you a pen, he is interrupting your work, right? So what he will do, he'll stop your writing and he will provide him the pen. Okay, this is the how the interrupt processing takes place. Your friend is requesting you for a pen, right? You will stop the writing process and then you will provide him the service. The service that you are providing him is you are providing him the pen, right? So this is how the interrupt functions in a similar way. There is an interrupt request occurring to the main process. The main process will stop its function until the service is provided. Okay, the main function stops. It will provide the service to the interrupt, and then again the main function will start from where it was interrupted. Okay, this is the what is called as event-based interrupt. Event-based. Your friend wants a pen, so that is an event. He will send a request to you. He will send a request to you. That is an event. Okay, based on the event, what you are doing, you are providing him a pen. You are providing a service, Right? This is called as event based. Now in the time based, what is happening is it will operate for a particular amount of time. For a particular time value, the interrupt will occur. Suppose say there is a calculation in the PLC. The PLC wants to calculate some data. So that calculation has to be repeated for certain amount of time, for certain value of time, right? So that repetition process of the calculation is done by the timed value interrupt or the selectable timed interrupt. So this selectable timed interrupt is used where the calculation part, whichever has to be repeated, is repeatedly calculating the process. So it is very important for the PLC to make the calculation from the functioning point of view, right? So it will do that calculations, and again after calculation, after that time has elapsed, it will come back and will start its main program, its main function. Okay, that is the meaning of selectable timed interrupt. Just a minute, students. The selectable timed interrupt STI instruction is used to interrupt the scan of the main program file automatically on a time basis to scan a specified subroutine file. Once the interrupt occurs, there is a main program. There's a main program. It is just like a main program and the function that you are writing in C language, right? The main function, you are calling the function in the C language. The function will execute. Suppose it's a function of say adding two numbers, it will execute and it will return back to the main program. Is it not? It's on a similar basis. There is an interrupt. This interrupt will cause the main program to interrupt, right? And after interrupt, it has to provide the service. So to provide the service, some other program will execute, which we call as a subroutine or the interrupt subroutine. This interrupt subroutine will execute to provide the service to the interrupt, which has requested for service. After providing the service, again, it will come back to the main program where it was interrupted and will continue the execution in the main program. Okay, this is one called as interrupt processing, an important concept, interrupt processing. And timed interrupt means it is not event based, but it is based on the time. The subroutine, which is meant to provide the service for the requested interrupt, excuse me, it will execute for particular value of time. It will execute for particular amount of time. For an Allen Bradley SLC 500 controllers, the time base at which the program file is executed and the program file assigned as the selectable timed interrupt file are determined by the value stored in words S:30 and S:31 of the status section of data files. So the time base for how much time the program should execute, that is stored in the status, that is S:30 of the status file of the PLC, right? And in S:31 file of the status file of PLC, they are storing the subroutine, interrupt subroutine, which has to be executed to provide the service. Okay. The value in S:30 stores the time base, that is for how much time it has to say perform the operation, right? Which may be from 1 through 32,767. It goes from starting value 1 up till 32,767 at every 10 millisecond increment. That means say it is 1 now. After 10 milliseconds of time, it will go from 1 to 2. Then next 10 milliseconds, it will go from 2 to 3. Then after next 10 milliseconds, it will go from 3 to 4, like that. So for every 10 millisecond increments, it will go from 1 up till 32,767. That much amount of time it will take, it may take, depending on how you write a program, right? It depends on that. Okay, it may take a 30 millisecond, that means it goes from 1 to 3. It may go from 70 milliseconds, that means it goes from 1 to 7. It depends, right? And after this time, it will come back to the main program and it will continue the execution in the main program. Word S:31 stores the program file assigned as a selectable interrupt file, which may be any program file from 3 through 999. In S:30, we are storing the time, for how much time the subroutine should repeat, the interrupt subroutine, for how much time it should repeat. Okay, for how much time the calculation of the should be done for the PLC, that is decided by the status that is stored in S:30, the time value. Then in S:31, it determines the, or it is storing the subroutine file. which subroutine interrupt should be executed, which interrupt subroutine small program for providing the service to the interrupt. It is stored in this S:31. Entering a 0 in the time base will disable the selectable timed interrupt. So if we are storing 0 in this S:30, it will disable the STI interrupt. Selectable timed interrupt will be disabled. That means it will be deactivated. It will stop. Programming the selectable time interrupt is done when a section of program needs to be executed on a time base rather than an event base. That's what I told. It is not event based, but it is time based. Selectable timed interrupt is not event based, but it is a time based interrupt. For example, a program may require certain calculations to be executed at a repeatable time interval for accuracy. If you want to do certain calculations, if a PLC wants to do certain calculations for some amount of time, so that the functioning of the PLC will become accurate. So for that reason, they are using the selectable timed interrupt. These calculations can be accomplished by placing this programming in the selectable timed interrupt file. The immediate input and immediate output instructions are often located in the selectable time interrupt file, so that a particular section of program is updated on a timed basis. I'll show you all the diagram here, which will explain the concept of selectable timed interrupt. So this is STE, selectable timed enable. We are enabling the selectable timed interrupt. Okay, from this first rung, 0th rung, we have enabled it. So it will execute from the 0 rung up till 6th rung. That is first rung, second, third, fourth, fifth, all will be executed. Then in the 6th rung, we are disabling the selectable time interrupt. STI we are disabling. Once we have disabled it, it will stop. It will not continue its execution. The interrupt will stop there. Okay. Then it is disabled up 7th rung, 8th rung, it is all disabling. Okay. Then when we come to 12th rung, again it is enabled. Selectable timed interrupt is enabled. Again it will continue its function from 12th rung up till 17th rung. At the 17th rung, it is executing the end instruction, which will stop the execution of the main program. Okay. So here in between disable, here this and this, it is creating a zone. It is creating a zone. That is a region in which it is disabling the program or the ladder rung instructions. So STI execution will not occur between STD and STE. It will not occur between STD and STE. The execution of the STI, that is selectable time interrupt, will not be executed. Okay, it will not perform its execution, right? Okay. The selectable timed, the disable instruction is generally paired with the selectable timed enable instruction to create zones in which STI interrupts cannot occur. So there is a zone here in between selectable timed disable and selectable timed enable. Between this zone, the STI instruction is not executing. Fine. The next figure makes use of the STD, that is selectable timed disable. STD means selectable timed disable, that is to disable the selectable timed interrupt, and selectable timed enable to enable the selectable timed interrupt instruction. So that is the working of this ladder rung diagram. I hope it is clear here, students, what is meant by selectable timed interrupt, how to enable it, how to disable it, and the zone created by the selectable time disable and selectable time enable when they are used in pair in the ladder rung diagram. Understood here, students, this one? Yes, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Right. Next is fault routines. Now, fault routines means there is a fault. That is one part. There is a fault in the PLC. Another way is we are creating the fault on our own. Purposely, we are creating the fault. We are introducing the fault in the program. And by purposely introducing the fault in the program, we are analyzing what is the response of the PLC program. That is what is meant by a fault routine. That is, we are writing a small program, a small sub program, a small program which is called as a fault routine. Routine means it is a small program consisting of few ladder rung instructions. That is the meaning of routine. Okay, routine means it is the set of ladder rung instructions, a small program of ladder rung instructions. Okay, so we are writing a small program. We are writing a fault in that. We are creating a fault in that small program, and we are including in the PLC program. We are creating a fault purposely. Why we are creating the fault purposely? So that we are coming to know how is the response of the PLC, right? So we are creating the fault. Once we know the response of the PLC, then we can think of if there is any fault, natural faults occurring in the same direction, in the same way, then we can easily repair that fault according to how we have analyzed the PLC when that fault was introduced purposely. Okay, that is the main intention of these fault routines. And there are two types of fault routines here. One is called as recoverable fault routine, another one is called as non-recoverable fault routine. Recoverable fault routine means the fault routine, if it is occurring, then we have analyzed the PLC program, the response of the PLC program for this fault which we have introduced purposely, right? And then it is recoverable. Recoverable means we can easily repair that fault. We can overcome it. Then non-recoverable fault means, or non-recoverable fault routine means, we have introduced the fault. Okay, after introducing, we have analyzed the response of the program for that fault, but it is not repairable or non-repairable. Okay, we are not able to repair it, so we call it as non-recoverable fault routines. We turn off the non-recoverable fault routine there itself. Okay, immediately there itself we'll shut down that non-recoverable fault routine. We just stop it, non-recoverable fault routines. Okay. Allen Bradley SLC 500 controller allows you to designate a subroutine file as a fault routine. If used, it determines how the processor responds to a programming error. If there's any error in the program, any fault in the program occurring, we can find out the fault or that error response in the PLC program by introducing this fault. The program file assigned as the fault routine is determined by the value stored in S:29 of the status file. So S:29 is used as the word where we are storing the status of the fault routine. Entering a 0 in word S:29 disables the fault routine. If we want to enable the fault routine, we have to store 1 in this status file. It is S:29 file. If we store 1, that means we are enabling the fault routine. If we store 0, we are disabling the fault routine. There are two kinds of faults that result in a processor fault: the recoverable fault and the non-recoverable faults. When the processor detects a major fault, it looks for a fault routine. If a fault routine exists, it is executed. If one does not exist, the processor shuts down. Okay. If there is a fault routine existing, it is executed. If it does not exist, then the processor is shut down. When there is a fault routine and the fault is recoverable, the fault routine is executed. If the fault is non-recoverable, the fault routine is scanned and it shuts down. That's what I told. If it is a recoverable fault, if we can repair that fault, then it is executed. If we cannot repair that fault, after executing, it is immediately shut down, or that fault is immediately stopped. So is this clear, yes, students? What is meant by fault routine? Any doubts here in this fault routine? Any difficulty? Yes, please. Any difficulty in this fault routine? Understood the concept here?
No, sir. Yes.
Any questions? Okay.
No,
Right.
no, sir.
Fine. Okay. Next is temporary end instruction. Temporary end instruction in short is termed as TND. It is an output instruction used to temporarily stop the working of the program. Actual end instruction is different, right? Temporary end instruction, the difference between temporary end instruction and actual end instruction is that in the temporary end instruction, when we are introducing in the program, we can debug the errors. We can troubleshoot the program. Okay, that is the temporary end instruction. When we introduce it, suppose say we have introduced here, this is our temporary end at this portion, switch 13, right? When we press it, it is closed. So when it is closed, TND instruction is enabled, temporary end. We can scan this complete program from this T on, switch 12, T4:2 up till this, right? Suppose if this TND we are placing it here, LT1, latch timer 1, okay, LT1, unlatch coil, U means unlatch coil. Okay, suppose if we are placing it here, then means we are able to scan the program right from the beginning up till this switch 2, right? This is the advantage of using the temporary end instruction. And remember students, the difference between temporary end and actual end instruction is that in the temporary end instruction, once the temporary end instruction is executed, that is after we are scanning all the process or the program up till the TND instruction, we can go back, it goes back to the starting program, that is the ladder rung 0 of the main program, and it will execute from the beginning. But in the actual end instruction, once the end instruction is executed, it will not go back to the ladder rung 0 of the program. It will come out of the entire program. This is the difference between temporary end and actual end instructions, right? When rung condition are true, the instruction stops the program, scans it, updates the IO, and resumes scanning at rung 0 of the main program file. Look here, students. It resumes scanning at the rung 0 of the main program file after the end instruction has been executed. Figure 5 illustrates the use of the TND instruction in troubleshooting a program. The TND instruction lets your program run only up to this instruction. That means the TND instruction is executed only up till here, right? Not remaining instructions are not executed. Only it will execute the instructions up till TND. The remaining this SW1, SW2, SW3, these are not executed. Remember, okay? So this is what we call as the TND or the temporary end instruction. I hope it is understood to everyone here. TND instruction. Yes, please. Temporary end instruction. Is it clear?
Yes,
Right. Then next is suspend instruction. The suspend instruction, it is introduced in the program here. This is the block of the suspend instruction. When introduced in the program, here we are denoting it by a number. Say we are denoting it by 100. Okay. So we can introduce it anywhere in the program, right? So once the suspend instruction is executed, it will immediately terminate the program. Right? It will immediately stop the program execution and it will not begin from the ladder rung 0. It will not begin from the ladder rung 0 as that it was for the temporary end instruction. That is the difference between temporary end and suspend. Okay, which is terminated, and once it terminates, what it will do? It will come out of the program. It is storing the status of the bits as it is. Status of the bits don't change. Even though all the devices are de-energized, the status of the bits will not be changed. They will remain as they are. Okay, that is the function of the suspend instruction. And depending on what we are storing here in the status file, right, we can execute as many suspend instructions as much are required, right? If you want say 3 suspend instructions, we can use them in the PLC program. If you want 2, we can use them, but this number will change accordingly what suspend instruction we are using. If you are using 3 suspend instructions, we have to use 3 suspend IDs here, like 100 or say 200, one more for 300, like that. Okay, that is the function of the suspend instruction. The suspend instruction is used to trap and identify specific conditions during system troubleshooting and program debugging. Figure 6 shows a suspend instruction in a ladder logic run. The execution of the instruction is as follows. When your program uses the SUS instruction, you must enter a suspend ID number. Say number 100 is used in this example. When the rung is true, what will happen? The SUS output instruction places the controller in the suspend mode and the PLC immediately terminates the scanning process. Once the suspend instruction is executed, it will immediately terminate or it will stop the scanning process. All ladder logic outputs are de-energized, but the status files have the data present when the suspend instruction is executed. Ladder outputs are de-energized, but the status files data will remain as it is when this instruction is executed. The SUS instruction writes a suspend ID number, say 100 to S:7 as it executes. This is written in the ID number is required when we want to use the suspend instruction. We can include several SUS instructions in a program, each with a different suspend ID. Just a minute, students. Just a minute. Can include several SUS instructions in a program, each with a different suspend ID, and read S:7 to determine which SUS instruction caused the PLC to halt. So you can determine actually which suspend instruction made the PLC to halt by looking at the ID numbers of the suspend instructions. Status file s:8 will contain the number of the program file that was executing when the SUS instruction executed. S:7, they are meant to store the suspend IDs. S:8, it is meant to store the status of the program which is under suspension. Okay, which program is being suspended, that program status is stored in S:8. Okay, so any difficulties here, students, in this instruction? Any difficulty? Suspend instruction?
No, sir.
Right. So this completes third module, students. Next is fourth module. I'll just give an introduction to this. So module 4, we are starting with the data manipulation instructions. I'll just tell you briefly what is meant by data manipulation. Data manipulation means we are either comparing the data, whatever we have stored in the memory location of the PLC, or we are moving the data from one part of the PLC memory to another part of the PLC memory. So this process we call as data manipulation. We are manipulating the data. When we manipulate the data, it is changing from the, that is the binary decision. It is initially under binary decision process. It can perform only the binary logic, right? That is a binary logic, that is on, off, off. That process is carried out by the PLC. But when it does the data manipulation process, what it will do, it can work not only turning on or off, but it can manipulate the data which are stored in the memory of the PLC. It can either, that is, update the PLC memory, so that either we can compare the data which is stored in two memory locations of the PLC, or we can move the data from one PLC memory to another PLC memory. We can perform the arithmetic operations. So all this comes under the data manipulation of the PLCs. Okay. So we can see here, this is the data manipulation. This is section of the memory map or the memory. If we are storing a one word, it is a one word here. It is a set of bits, 16 bits, as we can see. It is called as one word or one register. Then if it consists of many such words, it is called as one file or the table. Okay. If there is a single word, it is of 16 bits, right? If it is consisting of many such words, group of words, set of words, then it is called as one table or one file, set of words or set of registers, right? So this
Sir,
is a
but
table
actually
or
one
set
byte
of,
is, sir, one
one
byte is
byte is 8
16
bits.
bits.
No, no,
Eight,
no.
sir.
One byte is 8 bits. 8 bits. One nibble means 4 bits. One byte means 8 bits, and one word means 16 bits. Okay, just remember
Sir, in
this.
case of
One nibble means 4
64-bit
bits.
machine,
Pardon?
sir, in case of 64-bit machine, what is one byte, sir?
No, no, it is not like this. See, 64-bit means how many bytes it is? One byte means 8 bits, right? So 64 bits means there is no such a designation as we cannot call it as one byte. We can call it as group of 8 groups of 1 byte. So the 64-bit data, there is no designation for 64 bits, right? Even if though there is 16 bits, the maximum that we are using is 16 bits. That is one word. Okay, we call it as 64-bit data only. But what we can do, we can call it as the group that is 8 bytes of that is 64 bits of 8 bytes. We can call it like that. 64 bytes of 64 bits of 8 bytes, right? One
Yes, sir.
byte is 8 bits, so 8 into 8 is 64 bits, right? 8 into 8 bits is 64 bits. We can call it in that way. I hope am I reached you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, fine. So that is how it is, the data manipulation process, and we are going to study various processes in that. That is data transfer process, data comparison process, which are the two data manipulation operations. We are going to study them, and this shows the move or logical menu tab of the move or logical instruction. These are important. Say the commands which will be asked in examination. That is move instruction, which moves the source value to the destination. Whatever is the source, just like how it was for the that is the what we studied just now, the instruction which is moving the data from the source to the destination. That is from one memory location, the data is moved to the another memory location in the PLC memory. That is what is we calling that as the move operation. Sorry. That is what we calling it as a move instruction. Then MVM means moves the data from source location to a selected portion of the destination. It moves the data from source location to selected portion of the destination. Selected portion of the destination, not all the bits, but few bits of the destination. We'll explain that. We'll come to know what is meant by masked move instruction. Then AND operation. You might have studied this in digital electronics or in electronics subject in your first year. AND operation means it is performing AND operation. 1 and 1 is 1. 1 and 0 is 0. Right? 0 and 1 is 0. 0 and 0 is 0. Right? This AND operation. We'll take up that when we look into details of that. OR operation means 1 plus 0 is 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 1 is 1. It is not 0 with 1. Okay, 1 plus 1 is treated as not 2. In binary, 1 plus 1 is 1 only. That is what we call as OR operation. Then XOR operation, 0 XOR 1 is 1, 1 XOR 0 is 1, 1 XOR 1 is 0, 0 XOR 0 is 0. We'll see that. Then NOT operation is the NOT of 1 is 0, the NOT of 0 is 1. This we call as NOT operation. Clear means it is very much familiar to you all. That is clear means clearing the bit to 0. Suppose the data is say 1 1 1 1. If we use this clear instruction, the data will become 0 0 0 0. Okay, it will become cleared. The data will be cleared. It will become all 0 bits from ones. Okay, that is what is meant by the clear instruction. Right? So these instruction or the commands are important. You will have to understand these commands. We'll see the details of all these commands in our next class. Okay. In today's class, students, we have started from the that is masked interrupt instruction. That is immediate input with the mask instruction, right? And then we have seen what is meant by IAM masking, what is the masking process, what is immediate output with mask instruction, what is meant by masking, what is meant by forcing the external IO addresses, that is turning on and off the input and output device. We are forcing them to turn on and off. Then we have looked into the details of safety circuits. What is meant by selectable timed interrupt? It is just like a normal interrupt, but it is not event based, but it is timed based interrupt. Then we have studied what are meant fault routines. We are purposely introducing the fault to study how it responds to the processor program, and based on that we can rectify or we can repair the faults. Then what is meant by temporary end instruction? Temporarily stop the execution of the program. Then suspend instruction, which will completely terminate the program. It will not go back to the starting of the program once it is executed. There is a difference between temporary end instruction and suspend instruction. And then next is data manipulation instructions, right? The data manipulation instructions. So we have seen which are the data manipulation instructions, for moving the data from one memory to another memory, or we are performing the that is data comparison. We are comparing the data stored in two memory locations, whether one data is greater than another data, whether it is less than another data, or whether it is equal to another data. Okay, then we have seen what is meant by a word and what is file or the table. Set of words, we call them as a file or table or set of registers. Right? Then the various commands, that is move command, MVN masked move, MVM and AND or OR, XOR, XOR, not operation, then the clear command. Okay. So we will continue with the next part of module 4 in our next class. Hope it was understood for you all students here. Nemani Patil. Understood that
Yes, sir,
today's fine. Inoch, any questions?
Understood, sir.
Okay, fine. Then we'll continue in the next session with the some more topics in the module 4. Okay. Thank you, students.